Hey guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. This is my story within the shadows. So, where to begin? I think a lot of times we would begin at childhood, so I guess I'll just start there. For me, when I was growing up, I was born into an abusive household. My father abused my sisters and my mother. And when I was 5 years old, I finally looked at my mom and I said, "Hey, this is too much. We need to leave my dad." And we did. And because I had two older sisters, 10 and 13 years older than me, they had already experienced some very traumatic things in their life in regards to their upbringing. And so my upbringing was a little different because I wasn't in that same type of position as they were. And what had happened was we moved and I kind of became like an only child, especially with that big age difference. And I just spent a lot of times by myself. My mom worked like a good Mexican would, waking up 4 a.m. in the morning, going to work, coming back at 4 p.m., cooking, and then putting me in some type of extracurricular activity. Which also was kind of interesting because it was mostly like boy related, like t-ball and baseball, and just being with a lot of boys. And so I was definitely always a tomboy growing up. I have been reflecting a lot, especially with this Barbie coming out. I know, so funny, but I was like a child of Barbie. That's how I would create stories, was basically what my Barbies would kind of go through and whatever it is. And there's not many memories that I have before 5 years old. The ones that I did have was just more like scared young child. So it's very dark in that time. And when I was about 11 years old, my mom, because she started to kind of reclaim herself, she started to go out more, she started to dance, and go to salsa dancing, and she never had done that before having children. And so she left me at my cousin's house. And unfortunately, my cousin's father was, I don't know exactly where he's at now, but he is messed up in the brain, and he has molested more than we know. And he also was trying to molest me as a young age. I didn't know really what that was, but I knew it wasn't right. And so, I'd always be like, no, and very vocal to make noise. And the one moment that I actually said something to my cousin, she just kind of told me to stop talking, don't be around him, avoid him. And actually, for many years into my teenage years, he would subliminally molest me through showing his private parts at parties, or if he was in a corner and no one was around and I'd walk, he would have his genitals out. Yes, so very, very dark. And until I was 16, 17 years old, anytime I would see him, I would just completely look at him, give a dirty face, but I would never ever tell anyone what was happening. And fast forward to when I was 16 years old, and I was really just trying to exploration, right, at the teenage years, and doing what your friends are telling you to do, and they're all having sex, and I didn't realize what that as I knew it to be, that sex was for someone that you loved, and not necessarily for marriage, but at least someone that you cared about and that you loved. And when I was 16 years old, I went to a party. I was a heavy partier in my teenage years, and I drank a drink from a man who said, "Hey, I'll give you $20 to drink this drink." And because I had some type of ego and I want to prove myself, not even realizing that I'm with a whole bunch of men, and the only other friend I had was completely busy with her boyfriend at the time. And I drank this drink, and it was roofied. I had met a friend during that time that literal day that basically helped me not get gang raped. But I was still, I still had sex, and he took my virginity. He was thinking that I was in my right mind because it was many hours later, but while we were in the act, that's when I came back to consciousness. I threw up, and then I realized what was happening. That day I had a basketball game, and I remember going home and I just cried in the bathroom, washed, like crying and scrubbing my whole body down. And I was so hungover. I was so weak, and so just so many different things that was feeling. And I just completely submerged it. Didn't tell really anyone. About a year later, I had a boyfriend at the time, and he wanted to, have sex with me, and I would say no, he would actually bring up the fact that I wasn't a virgin because of my rape. And wanting so much love, because I didn't really have that relationship with my father, I did have sex with him, and it left me empty. 1 year after that, I met one of my first boyfriend, like true boyfriend, the first love of my life, and we had a very open and sexual relationship. I was still very young, but it was like love in a sense. And then once it wasn't, right, once we broke up, I actually fell into a very deep depression, and I didn't realize that it was a depressive state until one of my friends pointed out that I had lost a lot of weight. And that moment, I looked in the mirror and saw that my pants were literally hanging off of me. And I realized, oh wow, okay, I think I have been depressed this whole time. I actually was really, really sick. I had some type of like thyroid issue. They thought it was mono. I went to the doctors twice, the emergency room twice, and it was just a throat infection. Anyway, once that happened, I graduated high school, and my first year in college, I was still kind of exploring my sexuality, and I met someone and had like kind of like a one-night stand, and then it became 2 nights. But that person ended up telling another person that they don't really know why they were even talking to me, and that I was kind of just like there. And that person that they told admired me a lot. And so he wrote me, and he called me actually, and we never talked. And he just said, hey, please stop talking to this person because XYZ. That day, I had been invited to a church group where a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine at the time, she invited me to this Generate. And I went to Generate, and I just realized at that moment, wow, this whole time I've been trying to fill the God-shaped hole within me with men, with sex, with alcohol, with parties, with friends. But really, it's God, it's spirit, it's the universe, it's something more than what I've been experiencing these last, 18 years, and 19 years at the time, 19 years old. And so I just dedicated myself to Christ at that time. Got baptized, and I wanted to know everything because that's just the way I work. I am like an extremist in the right way. I will give myself all, I will put all my energy into certain things when I am searching and seeking. And I really just wanted to understand like who is the Father, who is God, and things like that. Who was my real father, right? Because I had this father wound. Fast forward a couple of years, I was in college. I'm taking a minor in Christian studies. I'm learning so much about the history of Christianity, and I had a lot of questions, and my faith was just not being matched with the answers that I was getting with. And so I had to kind of seek some other avenues, and that's kind of when I got into Vedic or in Hindu philosophy. And then I realized like, wow, like actually I had been shown all of these different types of walks of life from my father. My dad really introduced me to like the I Ching, Chinese mythology, as well as African spiritual science, Ma'at, and also the Hare Krishnas and Vedic Vedic nuances, and so many things had happened, right? And I caught myself drinking. I stopped drinking when I was like 19 because I was drinking way too much as a teenager. And one day I just had a glass of wine. I was 20 years old, and I ended up getting a DUI that day. Long story short, this is not what this conversation is about, but I ended up going to jail for 12 days. When I was in jail for 12 days, I realized that I could not keep going with Christianity, and I had to figure something else out. It was a very, very stressful time for my family, but it just felt like a really long day. And it felt like a really long pause in my life where I was able to just really go inside of myself. All I did was read the Psalms and Proverbs, and I also was reading a David Icke book. Who, if you know David Icke, he's like this conspiracy theorist. And so I was reading all of this, and I was learning and expanding my mind. And I had actually read a book right before that was called 3 Magic Words. And so it just really helped me. It talked about the universal conscious mind. And it just really helped me get through that time. Once I started to venture and I started to explore more of my darker side, meaning I was going to more rock and roll, I was feeling like, okay, I'm looking and I'm spiritually activated, but I also want to feel free, and I want to explore what freedom is in our society. And in reality, it is rock and roll. It is that idea that we can have fun and listen to music and go out and have that those higher topics even at a bar and stuff like that. So I was just really fascinated, and then I met the devotees, and then I went to India, and I was in India for 6 months with a friend at the time. There's a little black scarab here. This is what happens when you're outside. It just landed on my mic, so hopefully it just is good luck. And so basically what happens is I go to India, and when I came back, I went to Ecuador. So I graduated college, I go to Ecuador to teach English. And I was in my practice. I was doing so well. That a year passes by, I go back to India. Everything is just like, life is just really making sense as far as my spiritual life. I come back to the States. I moved to Mexico. When I lived in Mexico, I lived with 2 artists, and these 2 artists were going through some really heavy duty crisis stuff, like identity shifts and wondering what is the next step for them. And I was kind of just going with the flow. I'm kind of like a hippie at heart, and so I wasn't really worried too much about the future. I was kind of just in the moment, but I was taking on a lot of their energy. But because they were artists, I was also taking that on too. So I picked up a bass guitar. I started to write more poetry, particularly about my sexual encounters when I was a teenager. I started to write a poem about every single sexual encounter, every single just time that I was with anyone. I wrote a poem about it. And I actually still have that it was like a little chat book that I made, but I never published it, and maybe in the future I will. But it was so cathartic. And what happened was I picked up the bass, and I started to do, I also started to mess around with the synthesizer, and I started to make experimental poetry that you can probably still find on my SoundCloud, those early days of D. Dara, which is my artist name. And I just started drawing, I started coloring, I started doing anything possible to just excite me, and realize that all this time that I thought I wasn't an artist, all this time that I didn't accept that I was creative because I thought that meant to paint or something, that I was, because I was a writer. And then I realized that I was a musician too, because of how easy music came to me. And when I left Mexico City, I realized, oh my goodness, I am super empathic, that all of this feelings, all of this darker energy that I was feeling was actually not mine. It was the people that I was living with, because I wasn't going through crisis. I had like one drama, and it was so insignificant that I was like, this depression that I was in was not even mine. And so this is when I realized that I was an empath and a highly sensitive person, and actually very highly sensitive, because I realized like how sensitive I had been. When I came back to the States, it was 2017. I had basically lived like an ashram monk life this whole time. And then I'm coming back to the States and I'm reunited with my rock and roll life. And I see all my friends, and I remember that freedom that I felt within that group and that community, because there was no standards as far as like how you're supposed to look, how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to be. So I just felt like I feel very seen in that community, because I still consider myself a part of like the rock and roll, the goth, the punk community, because naturally I realized that that is something I adhere to as far as an outcast to society, to normal society, to the mainstream culture. When I realized that I had gone into an extreme with the monk life, and then I kind of went into an extreme again with the rock and roll life, my body started to become really imbalanced. And I wasn't eating correctly. I was staying up really late. I was still trying to chant. I was still trying to meditate, but I really just like let go a lot of different things. And so in the end, I ended up getting a really, don't want to go into too much details here about the illness, but I did have some dis-ease in my body, particularly my root chakra, and just my digestive was totally rocked because of my time in India. The first time I totally did not take care of myself, and I was still kind of paying for it, and I still am very sensitive. And so I basically destroyed my gut, my digestive system, destroyed my the way that I go to the bathroom and everything. And I found myself basically on what it felt like my deathbed. I was in bed for about 2 months because it was so painful for me to get up. And I just remember all I could think about was my native roots. I was just like, what is happening here? I know so much about, consciousness and all of these things, but there's something physically not okay. I'm not grounded. I'm not rooted. And what led to this really big understanding is because I had like a crazy mushroom trip. And in that mushroom trip, I had been starting psychedelics when I lived in Ecuador in 2013. And that's when I kind of relived the time that I lost my virginity when I was, roofied. And so I relived that in that moment, and I, gave myself some space for that. And I hadn't really done much, like besides a little bit of mushrooms and things like that, I hadn't done any ayahuasca or any of that till later on, like 5 years later. So actually right after this particular instance that I'm talking about. So in turn, what happens is I end up becoming so I take this mushroom trip, I go kind of like have this intense spiritual activation, and I'm already very sick. Like my body's already kind of deteriorating from what I had been going through. And I was trying my best to do some cleanses and try to get back to some normalcy. And I take this, like a bunch of mushrooms. It's New Year's Eve. I'm with a group of friends and family, and not too many, just like 5 people. And I have an intense experience, but no one was able to actually be there for me. And so I had to go through this extremely, extremely painful trip that blew my mind. Literally, my mind was blown, and I was having, like I said, like an extreme Kundalini awakening. I won't go into details because that's high level understanding, and I don't want to confuse anyone at all because this is not about that. And all I could think of is like call my teacher, my mentor, White Eagle Mataji, because I had known her and I had done the sweat lodge with her many years before, but I just knew she's the one that's going to help me through this. So I called her right away after this situation. I told her everything that happened. She told me that I was experiencing some type of Kundalini awakening, and she gave me the remedies to do afterwards. And that's when I realized, like, I need to be in my bed for the next 2 months. And I did. I was in my bed and I was just listening to chants, particularly grandfather native Lakota chants, and just really doing a lot of cleansing work. As I started to regain my energy, I started going back to the sweat lodge. I started taking that more seriously. It took more seriously my body and like what it needed. And I just started to find my rhythm and my cycles and just give myself that daily nourishment that is definitely needed. And I still, that is something that I not necessarily struggle with, but it is something that I have to take a responsibility every single day, because if not, then I can be thrown off imbalanced because of my sensitivity, energetically and physically. excuse me. So I end up meeting, this is about, I have like 10 more minutes here because I really want to tell you guys how I got through my shadows. Because I think at one point I didn't realize, like, I dealt with a lot of depression in my life. I've been in a lot of depressive moments. I've carried a lot of heavy trauma from past lives. And so when I started to do this work in the Sweat Lodge, when I started to realize like what was happening and I was being activated to a next level of understanding, I met someone. And this person, I actually knew them for already previously 8 years from the temple that I was going to. And they came into my life, and I was so surprised that they came back, and I was super happy, and I wanted to explore it, and I just kind of opened myself up to that, you know, reality, and so many things, so many different synchronicities, so many different dreams were happening, and I really thought like there's something here. And then he pulled back and he said, you know, I actually don't want anything serious. And what in turn that kind of created was me to go into the darkest night of my soul, and that included about two years of intense past life regression, meaning I was starting to have all of these dreams, very intense dreams of war, of bombs, of running away, of being rogue, of being a part of many cults, of a part of cults running, chasing me, governments, so many different things. And I just realized, wow, okay, there's something happening here. And I was also already going back into my medicine, going back into my ayahuasca journeys. Not too many because I'm sensitive, so I would only do one a year. But I would do, you know, mushrooms, and I'd work with microdosing, and I would work with sometimes heavier doses if I knew I wanted to get some clearing. And I just started to unravel this whole storyline with this person and with my father. And it goes back to Egypt. And it just was a storyline that was kind of passed down of abandonment and neglect. And again, this is why I say, you know, past life regression is not necessarily for everyone, because it does sometimes take time. But I'm really hoping that, you know, with my insights, that I can help you or any of my other students or clients to get through these types of moments faster than 2 or 3 years, because it does take that energetics to really get out of that place. When I realized that I was going through my Saturn return, it was my 30th, around my 30th birthday. It was starting around 27, and then by the time that I was 30, by the time I was like 29, almost getting to my 30s, I had locked myself in a room, and I just sat there with myself for 2 months. I wouldn't go anywhere, just to eat, to grocery stores, and I wouldn't do anything else. I would just watch tarot videos, and I would just watch these oracle videos, and I would ask myself questions, and I was journaling so much, because I just knew, first of all, that I was not happy in the public school system, that I was not happy teaching subjects like English and math, and I just wanted something more for myself. I wanted something greater, and I just had to see what was stopping me to actually get to that place. And so I just thought about, you know, I watched one video and it said, if money, you know, was not an issue, what would you be doing? And when I wrote down, you know, I would have a storefront, an occult metaphysical place where there would be a studio, where there would be classes and yoga and drum circles and women's circles and healing workshops and things like that. And then I started to realize, like, wow, this can happen, right? Like, what are the steps that I can do to take this to the next level? And maybe a month later after that, I received a treatment before I actually went to India, and I got the name La Casa de Luz, and I questioned it, right? I was like, La Casa de Luz, like, but you know, there's the sun there. And I just realized, okay, La Casa de Luz. And I started with divination, because I just realized, like, oh my gosh, like, I've been doing divination for so many years now, and I have never really taken it seriously. I never realized that it came to me at such a young age. And so I started reading for people, and then I started realizing that my readings were very powerful, and people were kind of shocked of like how accurate they were. And that just really took me into a deeper understanding of oracleship and mediumship, and I was able to transmute a lot of the darkness that I had felt before of not belonging, to realize that I had a really strong gift of divination, and that was going to lead me to where I am today, which is teaching about divination and teaching about shadow work integration particularly, of course, this is for creatives, but really this is for the healers, this is for the intuitives, this is for the yoginis, for the mystics. One thing that I will say in my journey of shadow work integration and what's gotten me to this point, because a lot of times when you realize that your magic is in your story, everything you've gone through to get you to this point to watch this video is your purpose. This is what's going to set you apart from everyone else, because no one has lived what you have lived. And so when I really sat, 3 years later into my business, and I really sat into what is my story? How do I help people with my story? I realized my story is really pretty dark. I kind of, kept it light here in a 30-minute video. But I realized wow, my story is actually about the shadow, and it's about navigating it, and it's about feeling comfortable and not being afraid of what lies in that darkness, and to become integrated with the dark and the light, because that's what I was. I had gone into the light of that crown chakra, that spiritual evolution of understanding of cosmology, of astrology, of astronomy, of higher spiritual topics. And then I came back to that indigenous roots, my bloodline, the reclamation of the indigenous ancestors that lived before me, that have basically allowed me to get to this point, to my father, to my mother, to my sisters, that have allowed me to learn from these experiences and become who I am today. And so if you can take anything from my story, is that first of all, it's never too late to pick up something like an instrument or a technique, a creative avenue. Never too late. There's never an age where you cannot do something new. Second, it is okay to go through certain periods of time of darkness, because that time is that time of recharging, and it's a time that we can actually move forward in our purpose. And 3 is take your story, own it, own your story, and utilize it to fuel your creative adventures, your ventures, your creative lives, your healing modalities, your businesses, whatever it is, your family life, the relationships you have with others. Allow this to be the fuel that helps you see that no matter what challenge comes your way, there's always another side. And really, the only test that we need is that we just never give up. And those moments, trust me, I've had many moments in my life where I felt like this is the point where you give up. This is the point where you step back and you say, no more. I just surrendered. And I just said, obviously I'm not gonna take my own life. I'm okay with getting, struck by lightning, God. if this is it. But usually it's not it, because we have to touch others with our story. So that is my story, guys, in the shadows. I'm not saying that I'm out of the shadows, because for me, I love the shadows. I find comfort in the shadows. I recharge in the shadows. Infinite possibilities lie within the shadows. And I'm constantly conjuring up what's within my subconscious mind to fuel what I can do for others, and how I can help and how I can serve. And so be the change you want to see, right? We cannot control everyone else, but what we can control is how we react and how we view ourselves, and how this propels us to move forward. I hope that you enjoyed this. If this resonated with you or anything, and you want to kind of share any insights, do please reach out to me. You can message me here on School, or you can email me. No worries. We are connected. Thank you so much for listening. Till next time.